this information is important, right? Because I think for the listeners listening to this, I don't want you to just listen to this and feel like, oh, well, this is fun to listen to. This is cool, right? And it is. I do enjoy kind of geeking out on these things. But I think that the thing that I'm picking up the most, and I'm hoping that you're hearing the most, is that the deeper you kind of go into who you are, not just who you are as a human being, but if you're into this stuff, I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you're very much into the Akashic record. You're probably very into astrology. You're interested in kind of understanding your soul's journey. I think when you get to that level of really understanding your soul's journey and, seeking out these tools to kind of give you a clearer image, it will affirm who you are.
I am so excited today to have Jummie Moses on my podcast. She is the host of Shifting Dimensions, the podcast. And we met each other back around December of last year as I was able to be on her podcast. And she was an incredible host. We talked about my spiritual awakening, my background, and my upbringing. And what got me the most was at the end of the conversation, she asked me a question regarding what was presently shifting in my own life. And at the time we recorded, I was hung up by this idea of sharing that I was in the middle of finishing my certification in Galactic Astrology and have felt such a strong call to share this information with the world. I stuttered as I tried to explain to her the direction my life was taking me, and she just sort of lit up on my story and my journey. And we spent some time talking afterwards. And here we are today. She has agreed to allow me to do her galactic astrology reading and share that with you. So we're going to be talking a lot about galactic astrology, what that is. And I hope that you enjoy the episode.
Cassandra, I'm so excited to reconnect with you. I know that the last time you and I had a conversation, you briefly touched on galactic astrology, and that was something that you were starting to explore, and you recently got your certification in it. So congratulations. And I'm excited for us to kind of like finally have this conversation and talk all things galactic astrology. So I just want to start off by just asking, how did you get into galactic astrology? Like, what drew you to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically, I had a love for astrology, and it was actually through Podmatch where I meet a lot of other podcasters. There was a podcaster that came up. Her name's Ulrika Sullivan, and her and I connected. I listened to one of her podcasts where she was talking about astrology. And it was the most incredible thing I've ever heard. I've never heard astrology spoken of the way that she did. And so I reached out to her and, we kind of hit it off, and she had me on her podcast and I talked about gene keys, and I had her on my podcast to talk about galactic astrology. And I just fell in love. It was like, I need to know more. And it kind of felt honestly like that liberating missing piece that has given me permission to just really embody what my soul wanted to come here to experience. And I laughed when I listened to our podcast, because when you asked me that question, I was just like choking on my tongue, to kind of talk about it. And things have quickly shifted for me to just really feel like I can explore and play in this area of my life. And so, yeah, here I am.
Yeah. When you first told me about galactic astrology, I was like, oh my God, what is that? It sounds so cool, galactic astrology. And I really wanted to know, what is the difference between galactic astrology and the type of astrology, the standard astrology that most people are used to?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. So basically, when we're talking about astrology, a lot of what most people are familiar with is going to be more like, especially here in the US, Western astrology, where they've got a natal chart and, we're talking things like sun, moon, and rising, and all of that. So it gives you that sort of natal chart wheel. Well, the difference between astrology and galactic astrology is that we're just taking those very essential foundational concepts of astrology and we're just sort of elaborating upon it. We're diving in deeper. So we're looking more at your placements of your fixed, of your charts to the fixed stars, different stars. And I might actually, if you don't mind, share my screen. Is that okay?
Yes,
just really quick, because I think this will help visualize it for our audience. So here you can see at the top, this is a natal chart. So this is going to be what, when most people talk about astrology, we're looking at. But this is through the Galactic Astrology chart, everything here. And you can see it just looks like a lot of, aspects and placements, but these are all significant to different fixed stars. And so you can kind of see the astrology aspect on the side, such as, sun and Libra, the house number. But then we have this additional piece that goes into the aspects of the fixed stars. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing on that. As we go on, I can get deeper into that. But the general idea is, we're looking at those aspects to the stars, and each one of them tells us something unique and special.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, right? So standard astrology or Western astrology that we're used to, a lot of the star placements and what we're looking at is in this galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy. So is it correct to say that galactic astrology looks at other galaxies that you as a soul, as a person, might have explored?
That's a good question. Yes and no, bits and parts. So I think this will help. So in your natal astrology, we're looking at the planets. So that's the key part. We're only really worried about the planets. Some astrologers will look at asteroids, but generally speaking, we're talking sun, moon, rising, Venus, Mars, things like that. Galactic astrology looks at the stars, and they are in this galaxy, but also beyond. So it's kind of like, that's what I mean. It's like a yes and a no, because you're generally not going to find most astrologers are going to be looking or considering or diving into any depth into the fixed stars.
Yeah. Okay, so Western astrology, we're looking at the planets, but galactic astrology, we're looking at the stars. Can we define what stars are? Because for some people, for example, the sun is considered a star, right? So are we talking about those type of stars? What do you mean by stars?
Yeah. So, that's the thing is there are so many stars out there and, so many things to consider. So we're looking at mostly what we would associate with different constellations that are recognizable in our star, in our night sky that we have. We also consider different galactic placements, such as like the galactic center and other things like that. When we're talking about other galaxies, that gets into a little more complex of a area, but there are so many stars. It's impossible to really list them all. So what we have in galactic astrology are like a lot. There's a ton of them that we can look at and consider. But these are stars that the founder, Julia Blas, has seen the most frequently in dealing with her clients. Yeah.
Okay, so Julia Blas is the person who kind of introduced this concept of galactic astrology.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Awesome. And I assume she's an astrologer. Do you have any background on her?
Oh my gosh, yes. So
what's the concept?
Yeah, so what's neat, where it came from, I mean, she's just incredible. Like, she really knows her stuff. And it's so interesting because when I've watched her videos and heard her talk about astrology, like, she just seems like such a logical, scientific mind. You wouldn't ever, like, for me, I found it hard that like, she was the one that this gift came through. It was that much more incredible to me because my logical mind was like, oh yeah, she knows her stuff. So she is actually what's called a QHHT practitioner. So she is trained through Dolores Cannon and quantum hypnosis technique. And so what happened is, in her work with her clients, mixed with her love for astrology, she started to notice synchronicity with her clients and their charts. You know, when they started talking about these past life experiences they were having, and, you know, as other races, galactic races, she noticed that patterns were forming in their natal chart. And after so much time in studying, she has introduced or brought out a galactic astrology, which is a way to sort of understand, you know, what for example, certain placements mean you incarnated probably on that star. Other placements might notate, you know, that these are star races assisting you this life. Others say this is, you know, gifts your soul, received through journeys you had on this star. So it's so complex with layers. So part of our process is we are thoroughly trained in astrology, and then also galactic astrology and Akashic records.
Yeah, that's amazing. So if I'm understanding correctly, galactic astrology intertwines with past lives and also kind of looking at your soul's history. So I'm assuming that's where Akashic records also come into play. So it seems like a galactic astrology, in order for someone to properly read it, they would have to have a strong understanding of astrology and a strong understanding of the Akashic records, and kind of integrate both of those. Is that correct?
Yes. And a pretty solid understanding of our galactic history and various star races. Yeah.
Okay. This is really cool. So I guess this kind of goes into the concept of soul originations as well, because I think that's a big part of like Akashic records, readings, like your soul origination, your soul blueprint. So I'm assuming galactic astrology, if somebody was to look at their chart or kind of get a reading on that, it would be touching on some of those, their soul origination and some of those things, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That is awesome. So I know that you and I had talked, and I was so excited to have my chart read. I'm excited to kind of jump in and kind of show the listeners what they could expect from a galactic astrology reading.
Yay. I'm so excited. So I do want to also, for our listeners, show one more thing while we're looking at this chart. Is the other thing is I'm going to include in the show notes how you can pull your chart. And when you're looking at your chart, when we're looking at the sun, moon, ascendant, North Node, South Node, we're looking at more recent lives. So you can look at these placements and, like, for example, here you can see Spica. You can look up, those beings and find information on them. They're going to be, because it's sextile, they're going to be assisting you, since this is your chart, this lifetime. And when we look at the more outer planets, which is going to be Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, we're looking at more of your ancient soul records. You talked about origins, which is why I wanted to show this, and things that are, beginnings of your soul journey. So yeah, I'm going to stop sharing now. So when I connect to the records, what I do, which I've done beforehand.
Cassandra, I just wanted to ask one more question. I'm so sorry to cut you off.
Go for it.
I know that in astrology, one of the biggest things that is talked about are the houses.
Yes.
Do the houses come into play as well in galactic astrology?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Very much so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and what's so neat about it is, what I do is, as I mentioned, we're trained in reading the Akashic records. So when I am reading for a client, I normally connect to the records and I just take a moment to allow whatever energy, visions, words, things want to come through. Then I proceed to read through the various lives they want to share with me that are relevant. I have a variety of different intuitive gifts that resonate with me. So sometimes they'll use feelings, sometimes they'll use visions, sometimes they'll speak. I'm also part of Galactic Astrology, is being trained in dowsing. So I also use that in coming up with all the rich, I'm told when I read for clients that it's like so rich with detail. And so, yeah, I'm excited to share. So when I first connected to your records, first off, there was a lot of energy. Like I just really felt this high vibrational energy. And it was so beautiful because I saw, like, if you pictured like sun, like sun flares and spots, it was like this rainbow display of light. It was so, I want to use the word intoxicating because it was beautiful. I sat there for a minute because it was just, it was such a beautiful feeling that was rich with curiosity and this playfulness. It was so beautiful. Some of the words I wrote down that came to me was that it felt very innocent and expansive. Like it had this expansive quality to it. And as this vision, they kind of showed me like I was zooming in to some sort of animal pattern. And as I zoomed in and then I zoomed out, they were showing me a giraffe. And there's actually something at the end, that I'm going to share with you, whether it's on the, if we get time to it or afterwards, that was super significant that they wanted me to share with you regarding the giraffe. And I was feeling and hearing they were saying that you are here to learn, explore, and creative expression was important. Also, when I connect with the records, often I will generally get some sort of guide or archangel show up. And Archangel Michael showed up for me when I was connecting to your records. The next thing I like to explore before I get into the past life is different colors, the color expression of you and your soul. Because when we look at colors, we can see they hold frequencies, you know, kind of like we also associate the colors with the chakras. And so by feeling into these colors, it gives me a lot of information on my client. And so for you, the color of your aura really came through as an indigo. This is also connected to the blue ray, which I laughed because it's connected to Archangel Michael. So there's definitely a significance for you of your throat chakra and your third eye chakra. And when we're looking at the indigo, this is an energy that these are individuals that generally have higher consciousness or are here to inspire different ways of thought, looking deeper, looking beyond the physical realm into more of the spiritual realm. And so these are very much colors associated with you. Also the rainbow ray did come through as well, which is connected to sort of like this divine joy, creativity, playfulness. It's light. And, you know, I said I felt this expansive and innocent energy that's very much in line with this rainbow expression. Okay, so now let's get in a little deeper. So the next thing I look at is your soul origins. Okay, are you ready to hear your soul origin? Awesome.
Excited about that.
Okay, so your soul origin, and I can, after I'm done, we can kind of like show a few things in your chart. But your soul origin is actually a little rare. It's not as common of one you would hear about. So for you, your soul origin is you are Hadarian from Beta Centauri. This is, like I said, a little more rare. They hold such a frequency for love. And they also, in their origins and their star, you know, there is a lot of diversity there. And they're also known for having just this universal love, open and supportive perspective that is generally free of judgment. You know, so it's the person that can be anchored in who they are, but also hold space for every other expression and what someone else's truth might be. So this is what came up as your soul origin. The other thing I like to ask is, you know, because I want to really understand, you know, your energy, you know, the fullest I can. So another thing I use is I'll talk to my guides and ask them to communicate to me through archetypes as well. And one of the things I like to ask is, you know, what archetype did your soul incarnate to experience? And sometimes you may instantly resonate with it, but what's interesting is sometimes it can be what, you know, God, source, universe is wanting you to step into. So for you, the archetype that came was explorer. And some of the words associated with that were also seeker and wanderer. And so the essence of your journey here and part of what your soul wants to experience is it really just has this essence of exploration, you know, curious, you know, tasting. And it was funny because when I was feeling into this, it very much felt to me, and somewhere I put a note to this, but I'm jumping ahead. It was this essence of like, if you picture the person that like goes abroad or, you know, goes overseas and has this like incredible life-changing adventure, and then they come home and they're like telling their stories. This is what I learned. This is what their culture is. And it had this essence of almost grounding higher understandings, other cultures, other expressions in your own environment and closer to, bringing that truth back. It kind of had that sort of feeling to me. Oh, yeah. Yep. There's my note. Yeah. I'm seeing energy of the one who returns home after their adventures and the growth that occurs from sharing your experiences. Okay. So when I asked what lives they wanted to start with, and that's the thing is, you saw your galactic astrology chart. There's a lot of aspects there, and it's important to understand that, when we're looking at the charts here, we're looking at quantum information, and we're looking at, you might get a reading now and you might get a reading later, and what comes up for your soul wants you to be aware of might vary. So for what they wanted you to know right now, and this was just, it was so fun, reading this. It was definitely touching to me. So they actually wanted me to start with your first life, your first incarnation on, Beta Centauri. And so one of the things I ask when I do my clients' reading is, I ask about what their body type is. A lot of information can be revealed through this. And so they showed me that you were a shape-shifting humanoid that was androgynous. So it was like you didn't resonate with male or female. You were the perfect embodiment of both. Another thing I ask is, we use in Galactic Astrology 2 terms, service to self or service to others. And I think it's important to clarify when I'm saying service to others, I'm not talking self-sacrifice, the martyr, them before, own your own balance and grounding. This is just a way to identify a soul that is more consciously aware and evolved, that is grounded, connected to source, and has that unity consciousness as a part of the essence of who they are, where service to self would be more specific to ego driven, and have a little more of a shadow tendency and motivation. Okay. And I asked, whenever I get shape shifting, I'm curious, okay, what are we talking here? And they showed me that you commonly shifted as needed, to a female form and also an angelic form. So those were 2 forms that you shifted into. For your archetype for this particular life, they said that you wanted to experience energy like the artist, the dreamer, an inventor. And that was very much a part of your soul's essence and journey. So from here, we get in a little deeper. This is where I really want to feel the story out. So one thing I asked was, what did she have a family? And you had a family with a committed relationship with others that were under your care. So sort of like you probably had some sort of committed relationship with someone, and others that were a part of that community that felt like, you could think of it like a motherly figure, or even though you weren't, one or the other, but there was this, family feeling with people that you were intimately connected with. And what they showed me is that there was a war that broke out towards the fall of Atlantis. Okay, so this is where all of the pieces and the parts start to come together, and it's like part of the job. I feel like as a galactic astrologer is a little bit of like a detective, asking the right questions, and pulling that story out. And so they showed me this storyline we're talking about for you. Your incarnation was around the time of 36,000 BC, which wouldn't be the start of Atlantis, but it's not 100% the fall of Atlantis. And you were not living in Atlantis. And you're probably thinking, okay, what does this, how do they connect? So I asked your guides, how does this involve her? And they said, you assisted during the war. And I asked, okay, can you give me more information? How did she assist? And I'm smiling because I got goosebumps so bad when they showed me this. They said, and this is a quote, she was in charge of unlocking dimensions.
Oh my God. Oh my God. That is so funny. Giving the name of my podcast called Shifting Dimensions. That is so funny. Okay.
Yeah. So major goosebumps. Like I got choked up, like, cause this particular sentence quoted was done through dowsing. So it's like every letter, and I'm like, okay, she was in charge. And then I was like, oh, wow. Unlocking dimensions. Okay. So they went on to say many people were able to escape the destruction because of the work you did with this. So once again here, I'm like, okay, I want more. So what they showed me is that actually, because the fall of Atlantis wasn't until closer to 50 some odd thousand BC. So what they showed me is that you were actually, because I was like, okay, she's unlocking dimensions. What does that mean? Like what in this in this concept, what does that even mean? And they said she was traveling to the future to assist during the fall of Atlantis. So you were actually, and you're not the first client I've read for that was from Beta Centauri that was interested in some capacity or another helping during Atlantis. And especially these beings are, like if you're going to talk about cosmic love, and care, the Hadarians definitely fall into that category. So you were actually traveling to the future, to Atlantis, to help with this. And they said that you have a unique connection to time and space. And I went later to look for resources that I can share with you after the call. And sure enough, I was reading something about Hadarians, and it said they are gifted interdimensional travelers and capable of manipulating time. And I thought, oh my gosh, like the synchronicity. And so I asked, where did the people she assisted go? And they said that they were transported to inner Earth. So I'm not sure if you've gone down that rabbit hole yet. But your soul is connected to that. It might be a rabbit hole you might want to jump down. And the last things they said to me, and this was another one that was funny. The last things they said, quoting to you to express, because I asked, what do you want to, what guidance, what do you want me to tell her? And they said, you unlock doors. You are shifting dimensions. And I just laughed.
That is great. Okay.
Yeah. So that was that story. Yeah.
What an amazing story. I have a question. So is Beta Centauri a version of Earth? Because isn't Atlantis only on Earth? How does that
They
connect?
are, yeah. So you no. So it's from a specific constellation. But it's like they have been from the records I've read, a lot of Beta Centaurians were very much like involved in assisting on Atlantis. And yes, Atlantis was on Earth. So we're talking travel here, space travel here, which for you, I mean, in this storyline, you are definitely a high vibrational being, capable of shape shifting, capable of like going through time and space and interdimensional travel. So you are correct in the sense of Atlantis is on Earth, but Beta Centauri is a part of the Centaurus, the Centaurus constellation. And there's Alpha Centauri and Beta Centauri, which are different, different energies. It's like when we're talking about things like this, and especially with constellations, you can look at it as that's like saying, Earthlings are all the same. And then there's this other planet over here in the same constellation. So all of them are the same. And that's not the case at all. And so to answer your question, you are correct. Atlantis was on Earth. But especially in the earlier stages of human development, here on Earth, I mean, we could go down the rabbit hole of our galactic history, but there are many races very, 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 very wrapped up into the storylines here on our planet. So there was a lot going back to, I think, I don't know. I think you've heard of the Anunnaki and,
Yes.
I mean, way, it's like you go back and there's been and I've heard, I can't remember where I heard this, but I had heard somewhere someone say that, at the time of Atlantis, that there definitely was like this, understanding and connection towards, people visiting and coming. And that was just like the thing, there was this inner space travel, that was just kind of like part of what was familiar, back then. Yeah.
That makes sense. It seems like there must have been some sort of vested interest in
Mm-hmm.
making sure that Atlantis, I mean, obviously
Yeah.
it didn't remain, right?
Right.
That civilization didn't remain, but there was a vested interest, I guess, from where I was from to help the beings
Correct.
on Earth through that time,
Yeah.
which is interesting. There are a couple of things you said in that reading. The first one with that connection to Angel Michael. It's so interesting because ever since I was younger, I've always just been in love with the name Michael for some reason. I don't know. I just have this fondness for the name,
Yeah.
which sounds very funny. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. It's also interesting that you mentioned the shape-shifting thing, which is interesting. But the part that's interesting about that is shape-shifting, like having like an angelic image, because I had someone else kind of mention to me that my soul originations are from the I have an angelic soul origination. So
Okay. Yeah.
that's interesting that you also said that too. I wonder if that's what they were picking up on.
Possibly.
Yeah, so it's very, very interesting. I have to do a deep dive into everything that you just said. And another interesting part about the Atlantis story, because as you were talking, I was going to say, I wonder if there's a life that pops up with me having something to do with Atlantis because, in the past, I've had these dreams that felt like flashbacks because they didn't feel like dreams. It felt like a memory because there was a
Yeah.
timestamp. There was something happening because, usually dreams are a little bit more abstract, but
Mm-hmm.
I've had a couple of like dream-like flashbacks of me living in a specific time period, trying
Yeah.
to like, go through or navigate a certain event. And I would say like a year ago, it's been a while, but not more than a year. I had this like dream-like flashback. I don't know what Atlantis looks like. I don't know what they
Yeah.
dress like, but I just remember um there was a war going on and like it was kind of like imagine a tsunami, but the tsunami like
Mm-hmm.
once it rests, it's going to like literally just
Oh, yeah.
like cover the whole land mass. So that's kind of
Yeah.
what it was. And I was the scene that I saw of myself was I was kind of in a, like you said, androgynous type body. And uh I was like picking up a child, trying to save the child, and I was like running away. And then I woke up and I remember thinking, that's so weird. Like, but in my dream, I knew that I was, or in the vision, I was in Atlantis. I knew that for sure. And there was an attack or something going on. And we were about to get buried underwater. And I was picking up a child to save the child, like
That's
running away with the child, which is insane.
Yes. So you could almost say that's what I just said. But
Yes.
also, because it was time traveling, you may or may not have. So it would be something that I would say, because like I'm not connected to your records anymore. Otherwise I could find out now. But I would say either A, that sounds like you saving, because that's the thing. You shifted dimensions, went there to save the people and to rehome them. So it's like either A, you could say that was you were picking up this original life, or you could also say, because sometimes when we get entangled into storylines in our galactic astrology, we'll go revisit places. Like, for example, I can say you've had multiple lives in Beta Centauri, it's like you could say the same for Earth, so it could be, especially with it being your first life, you being so vested in, drawn to Atlantis, you could either say maybe you chose to reincarnate again to help the people, so it would be something like in that dream. I probably would say, like, to feel in, did you, meditate on this or whatever, the feeling, do I feel like this is my home? Like, is it emotional? Like I'm losing my home? If it is, then you were probably there. If it doesn't feel that and you feel like, oh my God, this is happening to these people, I have to help. It probably was this storyline to where you were showing up and, in the time of crisis to help them escape. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that because in the dream/vision, I remember not feeling scared. It just felt like I
Mm-hmm.
needed to get this person to safety. But even when I
Yeah.
woke up, I was like, I'm not even sure what I just saw. But I was like, if this large mass of water was about to wipe out where I was living, why wasn't I scared? It just didn't feel like I was scared. I was more worried about getting the child out of
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
than my safety or whether or not I was going to survive. I mean, there was a little bit
Right.
of like anxiety, but it didn't feel like I was so afraid, like
Like
there
it
was
was
no
yours.
hope. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It just kind of felt like I'm here to get this child out for some reason
Mm-hmm.
and get them to a different place. And what you talked about, the inner earth,
Yeah.
Is that the same thing as the hollow earth theory that people talk about? Is that the same thing?
I think so. I'm not as versed on that one. I know that I'll have to send you some links of what I do know of, but I believe, yeah, it's like actually in Earth. Like, and I think I forget if they said it was like there's an interest, not in, interest, entrance in. I want to say that I don't want to misquote anything, but there's somewhere I read that they're like, yeah, there's a couple entrances to Inner Earth that are highly guarded. But yeah, the idea is, and I'll be honest, I have a life where there's been so many lives that I've read of people with this whole Atlantis theme here. And I had, in one of mine, a similar storyline that was connected with Inner Earth as well. And so that's why I kind of looked into it a little bit. But yeah, it's the idea that basically, within, Mother Gaia, that there is an advanced civilization. And from what I've heard, they're very much, I've heard they're not really that concerned. I've heard people say they're advanced and they're not really concerned so much about things, but I've also heard people say that they're Inner Earth and they are concerned. So I think, I don't know, I might have to meditate on that one and see what feels like truth to me. It's not been something I've dove into, but yeah, maybe you should do a podcast episode and I'll see what you come up with.
No, I probably have to find someone who has a lot more knowledge on that. I have heard a couple theories about it, and like you said, the two different endpoints or entrances to the inner Earth. So I have heard of the concept as well. Didn't give too much thought into it because, again, it's kind of, a lot of what we're talking about, how can we really prove it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I think that most things are possible. So it's making me feel like I need to go deeper. I did hear, I don't know if you're familiar with Daryl Anger. I feel like I'm pronouncing his name.
Anka, yep. Bashar.
Anka, yeah, Bashar. Yep. He channels Bashar.
Yeah.
And I think somebody had asked the question about the inner Earth, and he said that yes, it exists, but in a different dimension than the dimension that we're currently in. So we're not in the same dimension, but it's like it's on Earth, but it's not at different, the same time. Yeah. Different dimensional frequencies, which I feel like that obviously
that feels that kind of feels good to me when you're saying that. Like that feels like it really resonates.
Yeah. So that's what Bashar said. But and another thing I really wanted to ask quickly was like, what did you get any more insight on the purpose of the shape-shifting thing? Because that was cool, because like to be androgynous, but I was mostly shape-shifting to present as a woman, right? And then obviously present as this like angelic being. What was the purpose of that? And did most people who lived in, I'm forgetting the planet, is it could you remind me?
Beta Centauri.
See, that was I was second guessing myself. So do most people who lived there, were they shapeshifters as well, or was this just kind of unique to me?
Not necessarily. There's all sorts of different beings and consciousness associated, that were, lived there or were a part of that. And, I am not connecting to your records, but I will say this because I was sensing it when I was reading it. I didn't write it down and I didn't explore, probably because I got so many other rabbit holes. I felt like it was something because I did write as needed. So I feel like the purpose of, I feel like that it was, there was some purpose, like whatever it is that you showed up in that form, there was some purpose for you doing that. And if we think about it, you know, I think this depends on, especially let's use the earth as an example. Okay. Some people, if I was like, let's say I'm a higher conscious being that is, you know, balanced expression of male and female, you know, if I was to randomly show up in your living room, some people might freak out. You know what I mean? Some people might have a hard time with that. Okay. We can also look at it and say, okay, for some people, if I was to randomly show up in your house in angelic form, you might freak out, but you might be like, oh my gosh, God has spoken. You know what I mean? It's easier to receive. It feels like an energy that some people feel more comforted by, you know, other people, you know, and that's the thing is with all of this, and especially considering looking at what you did, if you traveled into the future to help save people, you know, in the midst of Atlantis. You know what I mean? I'm not feeling it as out of character at all for you to, I can see your energy as one that probably did appear to people for higher conscious purposes to relay information or to share things of importance. And even if it was for the Atlanteans, you know, maybe you appeared to them as more of an angelic form. Maybe you appeared to them as a familiar form, you know, but it's this essence of you were a higher conscious being that was really able to shift dimensions, you know, and do these things for the purpose of helping others and supporting others. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And I also like the time travel piece because I'm a nerd when it comes to that stuff.
Are you?
I'm just very geeked out about it. I love it. I love the idea and the possibility of time travel. So it's interesting just thinking about the possibility of having a life, you know, where I could do that or I was doing that or acting in that capacity. My human brain can't even fathom how that could work. But, you know, it's just very cool and exciting. And I'm definitely going to go down a rabbit hole and do like a lot more research on Beta Centauri and the race of their people, the
Hadarian.
Hadarians.
Because Beta Centauri is also called Hadar, Hadar. So that's why,
Okay.
So it can be either or. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how does astrology play into this life? Because it's been very affirming to me in a lot of my interests and not feeling like, okay, I'm a little bit down the rabbit hole with these concepts and being passionate about them and the work I'm trying to do with, you know, my podcast and other things. So all of what you've said to me has been very affirming, but how does this, you know, kind of tie into astrology?
Yeah, let me bring up your chart. So as I said, there are definitely multiple lives that you've had here in Hadar, but the starting one here that we just discussed is coming from this placement right here, which is Beta Centauri. And this is neat because it's in it's your Pluto placement, which tells me it's a very old life, connected to Scorpio, 26 degrees, and the third house. Okay, so this is how I'm sensing this energy, and how it connects to this is you can look at it at the core base of what they showed me. They said, you're shifting dimensions. You were opening doors. You know, you were, you know, helping people, saving people. Okay. So this is how I see it. I see it as when we look at Scorpio, we can look at this as your ability and your gifts in that particular life, where you could say a very occult in the sense of like mystic, They're a little more depth to them. It's like Scorpio is like that deeper sense of occult and mysticism. Also, one thing that's interesting is you are in astrology. This is a 26 degree, which, and actually in your chart, you have a lot of like high degrees that I notice. But 26 degrees, this is what's in astrology considered the third decan. So that means like when we look up here, the wheel goes this way. So when we're looking at your Pluto placement, which is down here where my mouse is, if it goes this way, it's towards these last degrees of the third house. So basically what that means is it has a external theme, a world theme, a higher conscious theme. And when we look at the third house, this is your present environment, but also communication. So to me, what this looks like is this wisdom you have is being communicated this lifetime through to the world for the purpose of transformation and higher conscious evolution, which kind of transformation is Pluto. So it's these things, these gifts of what you have are playing out in that way. In this present life.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, a lot of my interests in Beta Centauri, like who I was, the things I was doing, I'm sure I'm connected to all of these lives, but with astrology, looking at my chart right now, I'm tapping into a lot of that consciousness where I was in Beta Centauri.
Yes.
Very cool. You're
meant to share that with the world. And you can also look at it as, this could also be, if you're looking at it from that particular life, you could say that you can look at it as Pluto also can be associated with destruction. It's like when things fall apart. Scorpio, once again, I would say is that deeper mystic understanding, like that occult wisdom that you had. The 26, external affecting the world. Third can deal with, communication, but also environment themes. So you can also look at this and someone might look at this and say, oh yeah, there's a theme of this like, destruction that took place. And the ability, Scorpio, in which you had to help others, which is the high degrees of the sign. So either way, it's like you can kind of see this energy connecting and playing out. Because what are you doing? What's the commonality here? Others, others. 3, whether that be environment or communication, and there might have even been, like I said, an element of connection you had with their people in this process. I didn't ask that. But, there's this theme of transformation, communication, and higher understanding, higher conscious, evolved thinking. Because if you can time travel, you know what I mean, and shift form, you're definitely on a level that is, higher consciousness.
Okay, I need to tap into those gifts. Have you watched that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once? You probably.
It sounds familiar. Was it like, is that one where she had the crazy rubber hot dog fingers?
Yes, it's that one.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Didn't get it at the time.
It's a very interesting watch. I had to watch it twice. It's definitely more on the multiversal theory side of things. So
Yeah.
basically, like, it would be this version of myself in different timelines. So
Yeah.
basically, she had like a million timelines going on. And to kind of, beat the bad guy, she had to tap into her other lifetimes to pull gifts from those
Yeah.
lifetimes. So like in one lifetime,
Oh,
she was like
yeah. Okay.
a
Okay.
karate, like big
Yep.
time karate fighter. So she had to like draw on that life in order to kind of remember that she had the ability to not that
Yeah.
life, because it's the same life but playing out in different ways. So
Right.
it was interesting. So I'm kind of like using that as a reference point, but even though it's
Yeah.
not the same life at the
Yeah.
moment, but based on time, what is
Yeah.
time? It feels like all lives are happening all at once.
Yeah.
So I'm just making
I love it.
rather complicated joke there, but
No, I get it. I get it. And the other thing I was thinking too when you were talking is that earlier is you said that you've had this interest in time travel and stuff like that. That's one thing I've found. A lot of times, like those things we're drawn to, it's because there's a part of our soul that like remembers and is like, yes, go there. Play with that a little bit. So that is to me, because I think, yes, we want like that concrete proof, but really what I've heard from you is you've had a dream or a vision where you literally felt the essence of this storyline and you've been drawn to these things already that your soul had capability of doing. And that kind of feels like affirmation.
yeah, it does. It really does. And, it's so interesting. I feel like ever since I was younger, a lot of these concepts, have just, they seem obvious to me, right? Like I can't prove that people can
Yeah.
time travel and shapeshift,
Yeah.
but the idea that the universe is so expansive and there's so many things that we cannot see, but they exist, right? That we
Right.
cannot touch or they're not tangible to the human eye or human awareness.
Yeah.
I just always felt like, yeah, this is obvious. Like when I first heard about reincarnation, I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. Like,
Yeah.
obviously can't prove it. But to me, it was just like, well, duh, that's obvious, right? So
Right.
is this remembering, but I don't remember, if that makes any sense?
Yeah.
It's this like thing that feels very, well, that's obvious, right? And,
Yeah.
for a long time, there's been this frustration of kind of feeling restricted in this human body, right? So it's interesting that I had a life where I could just kind of like shapeshift and like move around and I guess surf or like, go from one
Yeah.
dimension to the next. So that's really cool. The
Yeah.
possibility of that. That's very interesting.
I love it. Oh, I love it. Awesome.
That's very cool. Yeah.
Awesome.
I know there's so much that we still have to cover. And I think, I think we probably should save that for like just one-on-one, just me and you.
Yeah,
But I
sounds
think
good.
this first life that we went down and kind of how it connects to astrology and how affirming it is in my life right now with the things that I'm doing and some of the things I'm going to implement or just continue to double down on and not be so hard on myself.
Right.
I think this was such a powerful reading. I feel like I have to go back and re-listen because there's so much to absorb. It's so cool, all of it. So very cool stuff. Very, very good stuff about galactic astrology. Very exciting. So I will say before we close out that I think this information is important, right? Because I think for the listeners listening to this, I don't want you to just listen to this and feel like, oh, well, this is fun to listen to. This is cool, right? And it is. I do enjoy kind of geeking out on these things. But I think that the thing that I'm picking up the most, and I'm hoping that you're hearing the most, is that the deeper you kind of go into who you are, not just who you are as a human being, but if you're into this stuff, I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you're very much into the Akashic record. You're probably very into astrology. You're interested in kind of understanding your soul's journey. I think when you get to that level of really understanding your soul's journey and, seeking out these tools to kind of give you a clearer image, it will affirm who you are.
Yeah,
right? It will
absolutely.
affirm the journey that you're on. It will affirm the gifts that you have. It will affirm just so many things in your life that you're probably trying to figure out, is it right for me to make this move? Why do I feel drawn to this?
Yeah.
Because that's what it felt like to me just hearing you talk. It just feels like, oh, okay. I don't need
Hmm.
to fight against myself. I don't need to fight against my soul blueprint. It's really, there's
Hmm.
evidence here, or it seems like I have
Hmm.
had lives and my soul has incarnated for a specific reason, right? And it might look different across different lifetimes, but the fact that that was the life that you just shared with me and how much it connects to the life that I'm living now is just amazing. So I hope that as you're listening to this, you can see the value in, exploring galactic astrology.
Yeah, it
So,
definitely opens up so much clarity, I feel. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And I'm excited to also leave the links in the description for your podcast because yeah, for those listening, it's an awesome invitation to open your mind and explore the possibilities of things. And you do a wonderful job. So I'm excited to, share your link to Shifting Dimensions.
Thank you so much. I'm the host of Shifting Dimensions, like Cassandra said, and I will be sharing your link as well. And just in case people want to work with you and really get a galactic astrology reading, because I think everyone should. This has been so cool. Um, I always like to end out a conversation with something fun and just ask, have you shifted in perspective on anything lately? And I can go first. I will
Yeah.
say that I would say a year ago or so, I never really was into sweet potatoes. And this can be as lighthearted or as deep as you
I
want it to
love it.
be. I'm going the light route. And um I was never really into sweet potatoes because I just didn't care for them. I'm like, why is a potato so sweet? But anyways, now I love them and I eat them. They're great. I can feel like they're great for my gut microbiome. So that's
Yeah.
been a shift in perspective for me. And it's also opened my palate to other foods that I normally wouldn't have been drawn to.
Yeah, I love that. That's so funny because I actually never liked sweet potato too. And there was a time in my life where all of a sudden my cravings changed and I liked sweet potato and blue cheese at the same time. Never
Oh,
liked
that's
them.
interesting.
Yeah, it was like I went two extremes, right? So, one side of the spectrum and the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would have to just say simply my shift, I think I can officially, full heartedly say, has been becoming more comfortable with talking about galactic astrology and, connecting with that. So that's absolutely shifted for absolute since the last time we spoke.
Yes, that's awesome. And thank you so much for again sharing your wisdom and your new skill in this. So
Awesome.
thank
And
you so
thank
much.
you for your vulnerability and letting me share some of yours.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I hope it does help the audience and it gives them an insight
Yeah.
into what a reading could look like or potentially be. So that's
Yeah.
awesome. Thank
Awesome.
you so
All
much.
right. Yes. Bye.
Bye.